For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services. Well, my editing skills are crap, but can the same thing be said about the premiere, let's say, first 3 episodes of DOTA, Dragon's Blood on Netflix? Stick around and find out. Chugga-chum, 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 chum, 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 chugga-chum, 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 chum, chum, cha. Hey, Peter Franson here from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. This is my uncut review of DOTA, Dragon's Blood, specifically the first 3 episodes of the series premiering now on Netflix. The synopsis on IMDb reads, after encounters with a dragon and a princess on her own mission, a dragon knight becomes embroiled in events larger than he could have ever imagined. Yeah, that's just really the barest statement of what's going on in this story. There's a little bit, I copied and pasted a little bit from a synopsis of one of the episodes. It says, confused about his newfound abilities, Davian accompanies Mirana and Marcy on their journey to a wise sage. It's really an ensemble cast. First off, this is an 8-episode series. I don't know if it's ends on a cliffhanger or what, and is intended to move on to other seasons after this. I watched just the first 3 episodes. They're about, less than 30 minutes each. And it gives us an ensemble cast. Each character has their own agendas, their own quests that seem to be largely independent of each other, but a few of them will cross paths as their stories kind of realize, okay, they're taking them on the same paths. It's that kind of thing. You know that all this stuff is going to come together at some point. But the background on the characters and the ultimate stakes for the quests that they're on felt murky or mysterious, or for one reason or another, felt like I just didn't have enough to really connect to them, to connect to the stakes. And I know that's maybe asking a lot from like a fantasy action anime. They're usually not going to be leaning on getting me to really sympathize with the characters. It's going to be more about the fantastical world and the big bad danger that's coming and stuff. But I felt like even the nature of the big bad danger was opaque, and it was like, give me a sense of what's the bad thing that will happen if they don't succeed on their quest. And I haven't really gotten a strong sense of that yet. The script seems to be betting on my interest in seeing where the story goes, but not knowing or feeling the stakes either for most of the individual characters or the stakes for the world at large left me uninterested really in getting answers to my many questions. I'm like, okay, well, it's some fantasy story. They're doing things, they're going to do more things, and it'll culminate in a big thing that they do. And that's, I cared about as much as I would care if that were the actual description of the show. There's some interesting lore that centers on polytheism and a dark goddess that this group of elves seems to want to bring back. And these elves they're seemingly innocent and naive, and so it's very interesting that they want to revive and bring back this goddess that others fear will bring her dark realities to fruition across the world, So there's in that some nice moral complexity that makes it tempting for me to want to continue watching, because usually when you have characters like that follow some kind of dark god that they worship, they themselves are really dark and disturbing and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. Is there going to be a revealing moment for these followers of this goddess where they go, oh my gosh, I had no idea what it was we were worshiping, which I think is probably where it'll go. Or they could go a much more unexpected route, and everyone else could be like, oh, I guess this dark goddess isn't so bad, or isn't bad at all, or we've misunderstood, or something like that. So, let's see, as far as the cast and performances go, this is made definitely in an anime style, but the script and voice acting is definitely Western, and thankfully lacks weird translation problems that plague anime dialogue, and strange performance noises like and these weird things that you hear all the time in anime for whatever reason. So yeah, those things are lacking. And apart from the visuals, it feels like a show that's written and made first and foremost for English-speaking audiences, which, as an English speaker, I really appreciate. The acting I would describe as fine, I guess, but sometimes it feels a little voice actory. I feel like, oh, they've cast voice actors here who have the timbre and quality to their voices that's unique to voice actors, and sometimes I would just like them to get just regular screen actors, or just not necessarily like voice actors to come in and do this kind of stuff, and I feel like it would maybe ground it stylistically a little bit more, but I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't like that if I actually got what I was asking for. But even so, there are occasional side characters. The tavern keeper in the second episode comes to mind, that seem a little stiff or otherwise strangely matched to their character's visual design. But compared to anime, oh my gosh, I really have no serious complaints here. As far as the visuals go, I think it's industry standard anime quality. I don't watch anime on a regular basis, but I just absorb clips and scenes and stuff from trailers and just pop culture, nerd culture osmosis. I get a pretty recurring updated sense of the quality of anime that's out there, and I feel like this is fairly industry standard, so which is to say really enjoyable to look at. However, I want more animation frames. This isn't something that's true of all anime, although I do notice it more in anime than in Western animation, where the animation will just look a little bit choppy because they don't bother to animate as many frames in the movement of a character as maybe a Western production or a higher budget theatrical production would do. And that's a pretty common thing in anime. But another thing that I see a lot in anime, and that unfortunately I'm seeing in this, is some background animations, like when they're walking through a town and all the people are cheering in the background. You largely have a lot of them just kind of frozen in their kind of like yay pose. And you hear the sounds, of people cheering and maybe jumping up and down or whatever, but you just see these frozen poses. And then every once in a while you'll get a stiff animation of somebody that they want you to focus on, or a group of people like, you're great, and they got really choppy arm waving and stuff, just for that little group there. And so it's definitely, in terms of the animation frames involved, it's a big step down from what you might be used to if you're not used to anime. And even if you are used to anime, I've seen plenty of anime, maybe not plenty, I've seen definitely a significant number of anime films and TV series and stuff like that have some more animation frames than this one does. And so, I don't know, I was just wanting a little bit more in that department, I guess. But I will say that the D&D-ish look of the world is very satisfying to me. I really like that aesthetic, and I wish that like really high-quality fantasy movies would lean into that very D&D type setting, and they just typically don't. Usually you're going to see that more in budget stuff, in B movies, in animation and stuff. But any chance that I can see it here like this is going to be really appealing to me. And it's a big part of the reason why I might continue watching the series. It also goes pretty dark with the monsters and bloody violence. I tend to like serious, dark fantasy and serious stories, and so I appreciate the visual nature of this story and the seriousness of it. So yeah, visually, apart from those missing frames, quote unquote, it's really working for me. Now, as far as themes, is there anything of moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance going on in the themes of this thing that might trigger some worthwhile thought or conversation? Well, as I commented on briefly, the lore is, I was going to say, the story. I don't want to just say lore. Lore could make it sound like, oh, it's this background world building stuff that's not really important to the story. No, the polytheism is absolutely central, I think, to the story and where the story is going. And it starts out with an opening narration that says that, in the beginning, like basically before there was creation, was this primordial mind. So there was a single, all-powerful being that started all of creation, and so it sounds like it started out at least as this monotheistic world, but this mind had experienced conflict within itself that ultimately kind of tore itself apart and seemingly created multiple gods in some kind of pantheon. I'm not sure completely. If you're a fan of DOTA, which stands for Defense of the Ancients, and it's a video game that was really popular back in the day, and it's still very popular, but I think it's past its peak of popularity. I don't know anything about the lore of that world, and so maybe I'm at a disadvantage. Maybe I'd be interested in hearing from someone who is familiar with the lore of the game or has played the game before and what they think of it. I'm coming at this really, I should have mentioned this at the beginning, as someone who has virtually no exposure to the game that it's based on. Anyway, there's conflict within this this ultimate mind that rips itself apart. And so that clearly differentiates it from, probably all monotheistic concepts of God, but certainly from Christian teaching, from biblical teaching, that there would be conflict within God is just totally outside of biblical teaching. And we've got this dark goddess, as I mentioned earlier, with these sweet, naive followers. I find that a very interesting kind of combo. And that could say something about, like, okay, if you see people that are adherents to a religion and they seem really sweet and they have really good qualities about their life, things about their life that you really admire, that does not mean that what they believe is true, or that that it's good for them to continue pursuing what they are pursuing in their religious beliefs. There are definitely some people that are adherents to religions that I could name, but I won't. That I think in many ways live very decent lives and have very admirable qualities, but that doesn't make their beliefs any more true and ultimately self-destructive, even self-destructive in the short term as well. So I like that kind of juxtapositioning of seeming sweetness and goodness among people that are following that which is ultimately maybe a very dark god of some kind. And then also there was this weird moment in episode 3 where these characters that are kind of sweet and naive and that are following this dark goddess, this presumably dark goddess, enter into, as an act of worship, what seemed to be the beginnings of like an orgy or a polyamorous relationship of some kind. There's 4 of them, and they talked about there was some kind of like a ritual statement that they made about like loving her together, or loving this goddess together, and then they start kissing, and the 4 of them, and they're a little bit paired off, but I mean they're also embracing each other, all of them at once, and then it kind of cuts away from that scene, so we don't really see them taking their clothes off and like actually having sex or anything like that. And the morning after shot, when we come back to, does have them kind of separated into their pairs, but it certainly started out, at least conceptually and visually, looking like it was almost kind of had an orgy quality to it, which reminds me of the Greek god worship that was going on that did involve orgies in the time during which the New Testament letters were written. And so, interesting. I don't know where that is going to go, if that will be revealed later to be kind of like just something that's dark and twisted, although polyamorous relationships are becoming more and more accepted and desired to be accepted in Western culture now. And so I would be surprised if they took the series in a direction where that is frowned upon or seen as a symptom of following a dark god. I think we are meant to like these characters and to approve of them. And so, just very interesting stuff in terms of themes. And again, that would be a major component of why I might continue watching the series. So where does that leave me? I mean, I have no idea what your tastes are in the anime, TV shows, stuff like that. But if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, hater. Skip this one, or at most, put it on a second screen that's near your video game screen, so that if you're playing like a grindy game and you want something that you just are casually looking over at now and then, and you're kind of vaguely following along with the story, that's the most value that this is going to have for you. Those themes, you are curious about where they're going to go, but not that curious. The story is uninteresting, but the D&D aesthetics are definitely up your alley, so it's really kind of a mixed bag. So that's kind of the category I would put it in for you. It's rated TVMA. I couldn't find certifications and info apart from language, violence. I think it also said gore, and then I would also add that maybe there'll be some sexual themes. There was like a brothel that some characters walked into at one point, or a temple having orgies going on. I'm not sure what was going on in there, but there wasn't technically any nudity there. But I mean, that could be a factor in why it's receiving its rating as well. All right, those are my thoughts. I would love to get yours in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, click that bell to stay connected. I want to thank the Spirit Blade Insiders for making this review possible. You can find more information about the benefits of becoming an insider over at patreon.com/Spirit Blade Productions. And then I hope you'll join us soon over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. The Christian Geek Central podcast is the longest-running podcast for Christian geeks with over 600 weekly episodes and counting, featuring audio versions of much of the same content you'll find here, plus exclusive content including weekly news updates from the creators of Christian comics, novels, and video games, debriefing and commentary about what I've been playing, reading, and watching, and my expanded responses to your comments and questions via YouTube, email, or the Christian Geek Central forums. And now, with timestamps, so you can jump straight to the segments you want to hear most. Get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services, and enjoy one more way you can geek out and seek the truth.